Today we had a small subject about solitude. Is solitude a necessary and sufficient condition for wisdom? We hear this quite often that just living in solitude is an essential part of the practice of Dhamma, dwelling in solitude. So is this correct, that it's really necessary to live in solitude, and based on being alone, now you can start to meditate or practice, or that some wisdom will arise? So the short answer is just no. It's neither a necessary condition for wisdom, and it's not enough to develop wisdom either. So just to give a basic example, there are so many prisoners that spend months or years in solitary confinement. And if you talk to them afterwards, none of them have developed any true wisdom. None of them have practiced meditation. What wisdom can arise out of that? Nothing. Some of them commit suicide. Some of them just suffer so much that they almost go crazy. They don't necessarily become better people out of that. They don't change necessarily anything in their lives. Just by being alone, nothing comes of that. Or I should say, certainly nothing comes of that if you don't have the training and the understanding in how to be alone with yourself, and if you don't have an aim. It's also not necessary to be alone in order to really practice the Dhamma properly. Not at all. It's much more important to associate with wise people, or especially not to associate with fools. If your only choice is between associating with fools and spending more time alone, then yes, it is better to be alone than to associate with fools who will bring you low and be a bad influence, as well as bringing problems into your life. So what is a necessary condition for wisdom is to not associate with fools, and to associate with wise people who can teach you Dhamma and help you correct yourself. A wise friend is far better even than having access to, for example, written teachings. Even the written teachings of the Buddha are very problematic because there are so many varied ways to interpret them, and it's very easy to interpret them according to our own desires, to read what we want to read or what we already think we know, to read our own opinions reflected back to us, rather than reading what is actually being said. So reading, depending on a text to grow wisdom, is very doubtful. So if you really want to correct yourself, you need to put yourself in the presence of people who are better than you, and who are willing to tell you your faults and teach you. This requires both courage and humility. And it requires enough wisdom to recognize the people that are better than you, to behave towards them with admiration and friendliness, respect, rather than jealousy, asking them questions. Solitude is not enough to develop wisdom, and it's not a necessary condition for developing wisdom. But one point that we should also make is that even if you're surrounded by good and wise people, that's excellent. You are one of the most lucky people in the world if that's the case. But even then it is necessary to not depend on other people around you, whoever they may be, for comfort or for energy or for attention. It is important to be able to live as if you were alone in the world, in the sense that you have to take responsibility for solving your own problems to the best of your ability, take responsibility to do what has to be done today and not put it off until tomorrow, whether that's in fixing something in the material world or fixing something inside yourself. Take responsibility for your own faults, to correct them in yourself, not blaming others and not blaming your circumstance. And in general, behave as if you were alone. If you're alone, the one thing that is really different is that there is nobody around you who will do it for you. You can't pretend to yourself that somebody will come along and solve a problem that you have for you. You can't wait for somebody else to do that. So even if you're surrounded by people, this is one way in which we have to train ourselves to think for ourselves, to calculate for ourselves, and not expect others just to tell us what to do. So yes, we're there to learn. We have to ask questions if we don't know. But first we have to try and solve it for ourselves. Only if we can't solve it, then we can ask. That way we learn a lot more in a much more useful way. So yes, solitude is not necessary to develop wisdom. And yes, it is necessary to associate with wise people who can help bring you up. But it's also important to learn to live as though you are alone, in the sense that you cannot depend on others for your happiness or expect them to do the job for you. You have to do the job yourself.